Okay, class, I want to introduce some nomenclature to you early on here in this course. You may recall nomenclature is a fancy word that we use. It just means naming chemical substances. Well, when we get to chapter 4, we're going to be diving deeply into nomenclature. We're going to be going over the rules for acid naming, for ionic compound naming, for covalent compound naming, and there are going to be a lot of things to have to memorize in chapter 4. I want to give you a head start on that. I don't want to just have us get to chapter 4 and then suddenly dump a whole lot of nomenclature on you and memorization requirement on you because it will be overwhelming. So instead of doing that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce you to 6 polyatomic ions, and I'm going to ask you to memorize these right now. There are eventually over 30 of these that you'll have to know, but if you get a jump start on learning 6 of them, just 6 of them for right now, that will be a huge help later on down the road. And I have chosen 6 key polyatomic ions because they will help you learn some of the others, okay? I have arranged these in columns here to correspond to their charges. So an ammonium, this should be a lowercase a, by the way. Let's fix that. Typically, we do not capitalize the names of chemicals. The exceptions would be, of course, if we begin a sentence with a chemical name, or if the chemical name takes its name from a person's name, like Moore's salt or Vasca's compound or something like that. But generally, otherwise, we don't capitalize the names of chemicals. So that should be a lowercase a for ammonium. So these columns that I've given you are arranged in terms of the charges on these ions. So this is a +1 column, this is a -1 column, this is a -2 column, and this is a -3 column. All right, so first of all, you're going to need to know how to spell these, and you're going to need to know their formulas. Now, I'm not a stickler for spelling in this course generally. If you misspell someone's name, or if you misspell some concept, generally that's not a major issue as long as I understand what you're talking about. The key exception to that, where spelling really counts, is when we're talking about nomenclature, because nomenclature is all about getting the name right. So you've got to know, for example, that the element chlorine has an H in it, right? That there are 2 S's in the word potassium. Those are important. And the same is going to hold true for our polyatomic ions. So your first polyatomic ion that I want you to learn is ammonium, AMMONIUM. And it has the formula of a capital N, a capital H, a subscript 4. Notice subscripts are below the level of the script. And then its charge is just a positive charge on that, okay? Capital N, capital H, subscript 4, and then a positive charge. That's ammonium. Capitalization matters. The subscript matters. Having the charge up as a superscript matters, okay? All right, in this -1 column of ions, I have 3 of them. One is hydroxide, and that's a capital O, capital H, and then a charge of a minus. Typically, when the charges are +1 and -1, we don't write the number 1. It's understood to be there, so we just write the plus and the minus signs. Nitrate, N, capital O, subscript 3, and a -1 charge. And then chlorate, capital C, a lowercase l, and I'll write it a little bit italic that way so you know that that's an L and not a capital I, because that's the symbol for chlorine, right? Chlorate, Cl, capital O, subscript 3 with a minus charge. Chlorate, capital C, lowercase l, capital O, 3 minus. Okay? Hydroxide, nitrate, chlorate. I suspect that you've seen these before, but you may not have been asked to learn or memorize them. Well, now you're being asked to memorize them. Okay? Next column, in the -2 column, sulfate, S-U-L-F-A-T-E. And I'll point out here that in American English, sulfate is spelled with an F and not a PH, okay? The PH spelling is British English, but the proper spelling in American English is to use the F, S-U-L-F-A-T-E. The formula for sulfate, capital S, capital O, subscript 4, and I'm going to write this as a 2 minus. Notice I wrote that as a -2. That was kind of a little bit of an error on my part. Ion charges should be written generally with the number first and then the sign. Okay? Sulfate, capital S, capital O, subscript 4, and a 2 minus charge on it. Phosphate, here again, I wrote that a little bit backward, but let me fix it here when I write the formula for phosphate. Notice pH, OS, pH, ATE for phosphate. Capital P, capital O, subscript 4, and now it's a 3 minus charged ion. Ammonium, hydroxide, nitrate, chlorate, sulfate, phosphate. There is an H in chlorate because there's an H in chlorine, the element. Okay? If you learn the names and the formulas for each of these 6 ions, then you will be well established for later on when we have to expand this list to over 30 and then be able to use them in naming chemical compounds in which they occur.